I think defining the work-life integration that you want to have is key. And I say work-life integration because I don't know that it's a balance so much. I don't think that life is ever going to be 50-50 or that we're ever going to feel 100% balanced. At least that's not been true for me.
There are just not enough hours in the day. Like, seriously, the amount of tasks you're constantly juggling, you're chasing deadlines and trying to find a balance. It's freaking hard as a business owner. If that sounds like something that you're feeling day in, day out, I can tell you, you are not alone. As entrepreneurs and business owners, we so often feel the pressure to do it all. Build a thriving business, nurture our loved ones, our friends, and our families, prioritize our well being, and still somehow strive to find time for ourselves. And in doing so, very often, what ends up happening is we put all of the ingredients into a pot that result in basically a recipe for burnout. It doesn't have to be this way. And today I'm so thrilled to be joined by Annie Croner, an executive assistant coach and productivity powerhouse who's mastered the art of work-life integration. Annie has a truly remarkable story, juggling a demanding career, a growing business, and motherhood, all while maintaining her sanity and achieving incredible success. In this episode, Annie will share her episodes for maximizing productivity, avoiding overwhelm, and creating a business that supports your life, not consumes it. We're going to talk about some practical strategies for time management, energy management, and building systems that work. So get ready to discover how you can work smarter, not harder, and create the life and business you truly desire. Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you on the Master Your Business podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects. So I could probably talk with anybody about this all day long.
Seeing as the subject is time management and productivity, that might not be the best thing to do.
Totally true.
But I love your enthusiasm. And I know you're an absolute pro at this. So I'm super excited to chat to you. So I suppose my first question is, how did you get so good at time management and productivity? Tell me.
Yeah, so I have a 20-year career as an executive assistant and in administrative functions. And for the last 5 years of that, I was running a business in addition to being an executive assistant, which meant that I really had to streamline everything throughout my day in order to effectively manage both a busy workload and managing my executive's entire life and financial world and world in general. I was not only an executive assistant, but also a personal assistant. So there was just a lot going on that front. And then I also had to manage and make enough time to meet with coaching clients and really manage my business as well. And then I had 2 babies in that 5 years as well. So it was just a lot going on. And so I really didn't have a whole lot of time to give into mind drama about the best productive practices, or really indulge in overwhelm. The only thing I had any bandwidth for was getting to work and ensuring that I was managing my time effectively.
You weren't just double jobbing, you were like quadruple jobbing with all of those things. Oh my gosh, and no time for overwhelm. That's just nuts. Okay, so I've got to ask you, what are your secrets? How do you avoid the overwhelm? How do you stay on top of everything and not let one of the multiple balls drop?
Yeah, so for me, the question that was always top of mind for me was, how can I get more done in less time and with less energy? So I was constantly strategizing on how to answer that question and answer that question better, instead of just asking myself, like, how can I get everything I need to get done today? My question was very specific. And so that question of how can I get more done in less time and with less energy or effort was constantly top of mind for me. And so I really want to view my time and how I managed it, not so much as trading time for money, but trading value for money, whether it's trading value for money with my executive in my role as an executive assistant, or trading value for money as it related to my clients and working with them, or even like my podcast, like I just really like to give small bite-sized chunks in my podcast. So generally do 20 to 25 minutes is like generally the max I go on my podcast, because constantly trying to answer that question of how can I offer more value in less time. So yeah, that's kind of how I manage everything. And I think when it comes to overwhelm, I think it's a both and thing. You have to be able to manage your mind effectively and not go to an indulgent place with overwhelm where we can tend to spin out and play around in our overwhelm. And then you also have to have a strategy for managing everything on your plate. So you have to know what the priorities are. You have to be able to focus and go heads down on the priorities instead of zooming back and taking it all in. Because if I had zoomed back and I'd taken everything in my life in, it would have been a real challenge for sure, especially over that 5 years where there was so much going on in my personal life. And then I was trying to run my company and trying to be an amazing executive assistant. I think that's how I stayed out of overwhelm, is I always knew what the priorities were. And I didn't discount 15 minutes. I've got 15 minutes. I'm going to outline a podcast episode. Let's go.
Well, how did you always know what the priorities were? What framework, formula, method, what do you use to determine your priorities?
Yeah, so for me, I'm just going to keep this more to the business side because this is a podcast for entrepreneurs. It was really what is going to be the revenue generating highest level tasks that I can tackle right now. And so I always viewed, especially like creating content, as putting money into the value bank. And then eventually I'd be able to make a withdrawal from that value bank.
Love that. Love that. Yes.
And the concept of the value bank isn't new to me. Like I actually got that from my coach, through my coaching school and all of that. But I will say that like looking at the long-term investment of putting in the time and energy to create a valuable podcast for people will only draw to me. So that was the first thing. It's like, what is actually going to create the most impact long-term? And then in this moment, what is going to be the thing that is going to potentially bring in revenue? So things like billing or whatever I had to do to get the next payment. I was very mindful of those things and bringing in the revenue and not stopping that because I had a lot going on. And I feel like as entrepreneurs specifically, like those high level tasks are really important for us to be aware of. And of course, to outsource whenever you're able to buy back your time, Dan Martell. So I'm reading that book. Thank you. That's a great, that has excellent strategies as well.
It's so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And life often gets in the way of business, work can get in the way of life, and all of those things. What strategies do you have to avoid shiny object syndrome or like distractions and things like that so you can focus on those revenue generating activities? What do you do?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think defining the work-life integration that you want to have is key. And I say work-life integration because I don't know that it's a balance so much. I don't think that life is ever going to be 50-50 or that we're ever going to feel 100% balanced. At least that's not been true for me. So really being intentional with how I utilize my time comes back to like, what does a work-life integration look like for me in this season? And then also, what long term do I want this work life integration to look like? So I may put more effort into my business in this moment, but I'm looking at that as investment in my long term success and as an investment in potentially slowing down a little later on down the road, being able to outsource a bit more a little later on the road so that I can really create that intentional work-life integration that feels good to me and it feels aligned with who I am as a human. So I feel like that's the first step, is to really get clear on what you want that to look like. And then when it comes to really creating space and time for you to focus, it really comes down to how do you work best and in terms of your body rhythm. Like, do you work best in the morning? Are you most creative in the morning? Do you do your best work late at night? Actually knowing those things about yourself is really key to understanding how to set up and manage your time effectively. I know for me, I do my best work really early in the morning. Right as I wake up, I like to get up super early in the morning, come in, sit down at my computer and write for like the first hour of my day. Then I get up, maybe work out, go take my kids to school, then I come back, meet with clients. So I think it's just like figuring out what works best for you as an individual and not trying to fit into a specific mold in terms of how and when you work.
I love that. And I think you're so right. I find that for me, sometimes I'm quite creative in the mornings and then I have a lag or a lull in the middle of the day. And I won't call them distractions, but I've got to cook the dinner, I've got to collect the kids to school, I've got those things going on. And then at night time, I like to work a bit in the evenings as well, but I
Mhm.
find it hard to switch off then. When it comes to
Mhm.
bedtime, I find it hard to switch off. So I try not to. I try not to work in the nighttime, but yeah, I completely agree with finding that right time for you makes a huge difference. And
Yeah.
I want to go back to what you said about the content and the value bank, because actually I loved that.
Mhm.
And I think so many people listen to the show they're doing all of the things in their business, and marketing can feel like it's time consuming. And maybe if they're really busy in delivery, or they're busy in sales, or they're busy doing the admin, they feel like they don't have time for marketing. So what advice would you give someone who feels that they don't have enough time for marketing?
Well, it's a tricky thing because how are people going to know about you unless you make time to set an intentional plan for your marketing? I think that for me, anyway, working on the marketing piece is a strength of mine, and creating content that is unique to my specific audience is a strength of mine. And it's something I really enjoy doing. So I think what that does for me is it solidifies the problem of my client, my ideal client, to really knowing why you're saying what you're saying online and why you're putting yourself out there in a certain way. And I think it just comes down to even setting aside 15 minutes a day to really think about, like, what are my clients actually struggling with in this moment? What am I noticing for me as a coach? What am I noticing when I'm working with my clients? What am I noticing is their pain point, and what are the recurring themes that are coming up again and again? And then that makes it super easy to address. If I notice myself saying something 10 times throughout a week to coaching clients, then that's something for me to address in terms of marketing. And I don't even view it as much as marketing as much as I view it as like showing up in service of others. Like, I'm going to get the word out about this specific topic, and I really want to pour into the lives of my people. And of course, I'm going to put a call to action at the end of that. Hey, if you are curious about working with me, please reach out, please schedule a discovery call. But for me, it feels much more, it doesn't feel as salesy as much as it feels like I'm giving people an opportunity, and I'm providing value for them. And so I think even that little shift can help us create the bandwidth and help us create the time in order to pour into marketing, quote unquote marketing. If you view it as just pouring into people.
Yeah, I think I agree completely. It has to be that perspective of value. And that, I think, creates a customer centricity and a feeling of what people can come to expect when they go to work with you. If you put out good quality content, they're going to expect good quality delivery, good quality everything else. And it just makes a huge difference, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think also that know and trust factor. Like, if
Mm.
people, when people find me, because I have been running my podcast for a while, I'm very active on LinkedIn, they already know and trust me. In fact, I hopped on a discovery call last week, and the person that I hopped on the call with was like, "Yeah, I don't need to go through the whole call. Just tell me how much you are and when can we start?" And I'm like, "Okay." She'd been listening to the podcast for a really long time. She already knew she wanted to work with me. She just give me the details. When can we start? Whereas normally I like to walk my people through, I like to hour value on those calls, and I like to make sure that I give a mini transformation on my discovery calls. And she wasn't having any of it because she just wanted to know how to work with me. So I think that trust is a big one. And it's going to be hard unless you actually put yourself out there to
Yeah.
develop
I
trust.
think what you just said there, a lot of people listening are like, wow, I wish that could happen to me. And it's just not. But I think it comes back to what you said earlier, Annie, around putting the time into that content bank and putting that content into the value bank. And then it comes back later in dividends. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love it. You mentioned around when people come on the calls with you and you're having a chat with them, and this person was like, yes, let's do the business. what are your time management practices for those discovery calls to make sure they don't go over your allotted time? Or when you have client calls, how do you keep them on track and make sure that one long call doesn't throw your whole day out of whack? How do you manage those?
Yeah, so if I notice that somebody is particularly chatty, I will set the expectation up front for the call. Hey, I have a hard stop right at the top of the hour. I have to hop on another call. Just so you know, if I cut you off, that's why. And then I think that as you practice the discovery call process, or as you practice and fine tune your processes, which is another great time management strategy, like if you're really intentional with the processes that you set up for everything, then your brain will be trained in that process. And for me, when I'm on a discovery call with somebody, I know the first 10 minutes are going to be get to know you. And then the next 20 to 25 minutes are going to be me walking them through a process that's similar to the wheel of life, but I tweak it a little bit because this is very specific to executive assistants. And then I have a very specific set of questioning that I ask after that. Um, and then we wrap up. And so I think that I've like learned, okay, we're getting off track here. This section's taking a little bit longer. So I'm going to move the conversation forward a little bit. So I think my brain works in processes. And the time piece of that is always a part of the process for me anyway.
I love that. And that process can only work because you have that structure in the first place, right? It's taken the
Yeah.
time to create the structure, so then you follow the process.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. And time management, Annie, right? I'm one of those chatters. I'm the guilty one because I like to chat to people and get to know them. And in Ireland, it's, well, who do you know from up the road, right? That is the nature of conversations here. And are you related to so and so and all of those things? So if you're the chatter and you're trying to manage your time, have you got any tips for people with personality types like me who like to chat loads?
Yeah, I think I have the same problem. And so I think that I really love to hear about people and I can get really engrossed in conversation. And then I'll think of a story that I want to share in relation to what I just heard. And I think it's a beautiful thing and it's actually a gift. It's how people connect with you. And so I think it's just a matter of in your process, very deliberate and purposeful about setting time parameters for the conversational portion of the meeting, the session, or the now we're going to get down to business portion, and really hearing from the other person and making it all about them too. As the provider, we really want our clients to be the hero of the story. So
Love that
we,
reference.
yes, I thought you was. So like really reminding yourself of those things so we can always bring it back to the client, and the client experience is important.
Okay, I love that. And let's say, in terms of you and what advice you might give to other business owners and entrepreneurs, when it's Sunday evening and you're looking at your week ahead or the month ahead, what do you do to plan your time so that you are as productive as you can be? You can do more in less time with less energy. How do you make that happen?
Yeah, so I think as entrepreneurs, a lot of us have a whole bunch of high level amazing ideas, and I saw this a lot as an executive assistant from the assisting side too. You're dealing with a lot of visionaries, you're dealing with a lot of people who want to do all the things and want to have the best, make the best impact or the biggest impact. And what ends up happening is we end up what I like to call glitter throwing, which is we end up like throwing out a whole bunch of ideas, and it's hard to put the glitter back in the bottle once it's been thrown. So I think first of all, just getting really clear on what you want to achieve in this season is super important. And the way that I do this is I do a thought download. Like I just get everything out of my head. And I'll do this at the beginning of the year. And then I'll plan out, okay, so in Q1, I want to be focused more on this. In Q2, I want to focus on B. Q3, I want to focus on C. And I'll just check in with myself on a monthly basis around how I'm progressing and if anything has shifted or changed in terms of my priorities. And what I love about this is that it captures all the information somewhere, and yet my brain doesn't have to focus on all the information all the time because I've been intentional about what I'm going to tackle throughout my year. And so that's a great strategy, just like getting it all out of your head and onto paper, and then you can see it out externalized and then set the priorities in a way that makes sense for you or in a way that makes sense for your business moving forward. For example, Q4 of last year, I was really focused on cleaning up the back end of my business and also fine-tuning my voice, which is how I'm Deirdre. Fine-tuning my brand voice and fine-tuning how I'm talking to my potential clients and positioning myself in the marketplace. And so one was heavily focused on that piece and on making sure that all of that was dialed in and fine-tuned. And now in Q2, I'm like focusing on, okay, how can I increase revenue streams and then also build systems that will serve me and my business in the long term. So I wanted to work on systems in Q4 of last year, but I knew it wasn't the time. I knew that there were some other things that needed to be in place before I was working on those systems. So it's just hard when you can see everything that's broken and you want to fix everything all at once. But if you can actually pace yourself, I've just found it to be a much more manageable process that way.
I think that's really ties into actually what you said at the start, which was around streamlining things and getting yourself organized. And like you talked about tools and some of the things on the back end now, and even for planning week or quarter by quarter, the year out, what tools or systems do you use or that other business owners might be able to use to do the same thing?
Yeah, so I think first of all, I really was focused on minimizing my tech stack. And so I like platforms like Kajabi because it's a one-stop shop. I can host my podcast through Kajabi. I can host all my course materials, all the materials for my clients. I can host pretty much everything through Kajabi. Uh, and it really reduced my tech stack. So I don't have a WordPress and this for my course platform and this, it just wasn't all a one-stop shop in one place. And also, I think in terms of other systems that I utilize, I'm trying to find like a task management system. I think I'm going to go with Notion. And so I'm building that part out as we speak. I'm also going to be offloading some things. I just hired an executive assistant myself this week, which is really interesting.
Woohoo!
She's fractional and she'll be working very part-time for me, but that's going to be able to have me offload some things. I think Honeybook is another tool that I want to use in terms of onboarding clients. Just getting all of those bits and pieces up and running and working with my team to then fine tune everything is where I'm headed moving forward. I will say that the systems that have kept me on track so far are really a decent task tracking system. And prior to actually having a team, I use Trello because Trello, you can auto-populate things to your board. You can actually email tasks to your board. And so that's actually how I managed my life as an executive assistant. And I train executive assistants on how to set up their Trello boards to be effective. But you actually need to think about these things. It's just a losing proposition to manage your tasks in your email inbox and on sticky notes and in DMs or whatever. It's a losing proposition because all of that information won't get captured in one centralized location. I strongly encourage us all to really level up our task tracking system. And the other system that I would really encourage us all to implement is an email management system. Because if you don't manage your inbox will manage you.
I feel like, Annie, you could have missed your calling as like a fractional COO, where you go around and you like help people to streamline everything in their businesses and get totally organized. I'm like, that's business number 2 down the line for Annie. You heard it here first.
I love that. Yeah. And actually, it's funny because I'll be working with my coaching clients, and EAs to CEOs are generally a large part of who I coach. And they'll talk about the processes in their company. And I've actually offered to come into companies and help them streamline their processes, especially in startup environments where it's just complete chaos and they haven't created their systems yet. So it's something that I would love to eventually do more of for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a strength. You can hear it when you're talking for sure. It's definitely a strength. Yeah. Biz number 2.
Yes, man. Bring it on.
Look, you were already double jobbing before. There's nothing to stop you.
I feel like if I get my systems really streamlined in this business, there really isn't anything to stop me from starting a new one.
Yeah, fantastic. I know it's the same for everyone, folks. And systems are not just the tech that you use. It's everything and throughout the entire customer journey. It can be your process, as Annie said, even being deliberate about those sales conversations. And I think that's just important to factor as well. But if you have a process for that, it means somebody else can do it. And you don't necessarily have to always be the one to do it, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the other piece of this. It can be really hard to let pieces of our business go because our businesses are like our babies. And we're like,
Yeah.
oh, grow, little baby, grow. And we keep fostering it. We keep pouring into it. We pour ourselves into it. And we're just so excited to see how this thing grows. And so to give pieces of that business away just feels really hard for a lot of us. But it's really the key to your success. And what I love about actually being able to pass things off, and I found this to be true as an executive assistant as well, when my systems were in line and when I had my executive lined out, then he could rest and then he could take a step back from the business and he could go on vacation with his family without worrying about anything. And for me, I'm trying to look at it from the executive assistant position because I'm uniquely positioned to do that, and the executive's position where it's I need to be able to let go of these things so that I can go rest and play and tap into what brings me joy aside from the business. And so I can really focus on what fills me up and brings me joy within my business as well. It can be
Yeah.
a hard thing to do though.
Yeah, I absolutely. And I think one of the things actually is recently I interviewed Laura Whedon as well, and she talks about virtual assistants and hiring virtual assistants for the success of your business. And we briefly touched on standard operating procedures and having standard operating procedures and the difference that they can make. But I like some of the people listening, Annie, they may be solopreneurs. So what would you say to them about standard operating procedures? What would you say to them about those?
Yeah, so I definitely think even for yourself, writing out there and everything that you do, getting it all out of your head, and then going back through your standard operating procedures and making sure that you're creating those with intention. Because often we do things we shoot from the hip a lot instead of actually showing up intentionally for our business and thereby showing up intentionally for our systems that we're creating. And so standard operating procedures are absolutely necessary, even if you're the only person running your business, to be able to capture that information, to be able to externalize that information, to be able to see that information outside of you and to ask yourself the question, how can I streamline this process? How can I get more of this done in less time and with less effort or energy? So I
That might
always
be
like
my
to
new
run.
phrase, by the way. I'm going to be asking myself that now all of the time.
Yeah, yeah. It's a really important question to ask because it does cut away so much of the fat. It cuts away so much of the things that are unnecessary or that our brain would like to offer up to us as a priority when it's actually probably shouldn't be. Yeah.
Yeah. Annie, oh my gosh, what is one thing that you wish every business owner knew about time management or productivity?
Oh man.
Just to throw that one at you.
I think it would be that the priority really be the priority, that you actually pace yourself when it comes to your vision for your company. And I know for myself over the last 8 months, that has been really a challenge for me to pace myself because I've noticed some very glaring, broken things. And I've got a timeline to fix them, but actually showing that constraint and actually focusing on the main thing and keeping the main thing through this season so that when you hit the next season, you're ready to tackle the next challenge and you can be fully present for that then. So I think that would be the number one, I think not just time management thing, but energy management. And so we often think about managing our time as managing hours, but I would also say that managing your energy is equally as important. And so really keeping the main thing.
Yeah, it sounds simple, but it's not. And I love what you're saying about pacing yourself too. And it's the very first coaching session I think I had when I started my business. My coach said to me, and it's one of those aha moments. She said to me that you'll overestimate what you can achieve in the short term, but underestimate what you can achieve in the long term.
Mhm.
And I think that comes back to being intentional or being very realistic. And I think pacing yourself is probably the best way to do it. But I hadn't thought of it like that until this conversation. So thank you, Annie.
My pleasure.
So tell us what's coming up for you in your business. Anything you'd like to share with listeners?
Yeah, so I think because of my success with you, actually, so Deirdre's a genius at helping people like fine tune their messaging and find their brand voice. I have been really inundated with business lately, which is a great problem to have. And through this last launch, I just realized that I need more support. So I've always had a virtual assistant because I've always known the value of an assistant. But I'm going to be shifting those roles a little bit. I'm going to be bringing on an executive assistant to help me manage creating the processes because I spend so much of my time on client calls. I just don't really have a whole lot of bandwidth to actually be the boots on the ground in terms of the facilitation and creation of my own systems in terms of like Notion and a couple of others that I want to implement. Yeah, this upcoming season is going to be one of processes. It's going to be one of onboarding new people. And fortunately, I do have some SOPs set up so I can just hand those off to the executive assistant that I'm going to be onboarding and everything. So for me, it's just a season of growth and it's a season of really focusing and narrowing my focus on creating those processes that will set me up for long-term success. So I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited about what my business will look like 6 months to a year from now as a result of setting up these processes.
That is so super exciting. I can't wait to see what happens for you too. It's so exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Business number 2 down the road.
Yes, ma'am.
I love it. I love it. Annie, thank you. I'm going to share your links and everything in the show notes so that people can check you out, listen to your podcast, get loads more tips, and follow you on LinkedIn and all of the things. Before we wrap up, is there any one thing that you'd like to share that you haven't yet shared?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything. Like just, yeah, keep the main thing the main thing.
Love it. That's it. Perfect. Thank you, Annie. Appreciate you being here.
It's been an honor. Thank you, Deirdre.
Wow, Annie, thank you so much for sharing your incredible insights and wisdom with us today. Folks, I don't know about you, but Annie's passion for helping others is really inspiring, and her practical tips on time management and productivity are absolute gold. So remember, folks, the key takeaway is to focus on the priority, create systems that streamline your business, and be intentional about your work-life integration. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to Annie's podcast, her LinkedIn profile, and other valuable resources she mentioned. And lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, please do me a huge favor. Take 1 second and rate and review the Master Your Business podcast on your favorite platform. And go one step further and follow us. And the more followers we have, the more ratings and reviews, the more it helps other ambitious entrepreneurs just like you to find the show and get the support that they need to master their businesses. So thank you for listening, and until next time, keep mastering your business.